My brothers and sisters, many people think strength comes from being surrounded, from being admired, from being needed. But let me tell you something uncomfortable and freeing at the same time. The moment you stop needing people to feel whole, you become powerful. Not arrogant, not cold, powerful. Because when your happiness no longer depends on who stays, who leaves, who approves, or who notices, you are no longer controlled by fear. And fear is what weakens most people. Not lack of talent, not lack of opportunity, but fear of being alone. Today, let us correct that misunderstanding. One need is not love. Needing people is often mistaken for loving them because the emotions feel intense, the attachment feels deep, the fear of losing them feels unbearable. But intensity is not proof of love. It is often proof of insecurity. Love is a choice. Need is a dependency. Love says, I choose you, but I am still whole without you. Need says, I cannot function if you leave. Those two states may look similar on the surface, but they produce completely different lives. When you need people to validate you, your standards quietly collapse. You stop asking whether a relationship is healthy and start asking whether it will last. You stop asking whether you are respected and start asking whether you are still wanted. That shift is subtle, but it is dangerous. You begin tolerating what your conscience already knows is wrong, not because you agree with it, but because you are afraid of being alone. So you excuse disrespect, you justify inconsistency, you explain away emotional neglect. You tell yourself they are busy or going through something or don't mean it that way. But if you are honest, you are not being patient, you are being afraid. Fear keeps you quiet when your dignity is being slowly eroded. It keeps you available when you should have stepped back. It keeps you invested when the effort is one-sided. And over time, that fear trains people how to treat you. Love does not do that. Love allows space. It breathes. It trusts. It does not panic at silence or distance. Love can survive boundaries. In fact, it requires them. Need, on the other hand, demands reassurance, constant reassurance, proof, attention, confirmation. When reassurance is missing, the mind spirals. You overthink messages. You read tone into silence. You replay conversations. You look for signs that you are still important. That is not peace. That is emotional dependence. And dependence always comes at a cost. The cost is that you lose your ability to walk away. Even when walking away is the healthiest option, you hesitate. Even when your self-respect is asking you to leave, you negotiate with yourself. You say, just a little longer. You say, maybe it will change. You say, at least I'm not alone. But staying where you are diminished is not connection. It is self-abandonment. This is why stopping the need for validation changes everything. The moment you stop needing people to feel valuable, your relationships become healthier. Not because people suddenly become perfect, but because your behavior changes. You stop clinging. You stop over-explaining. You stop begging for effort. You stop trying to prove your worth through patience, sacrifice, or silence. You no longer measure love by how much you endure. You begin measuring it by how much peace it brings. You speak more honestly because you are no longer afraid of losing access. You set clearer boundaries because you are no longer negotiating your worth. You notice red flags earlier because you are not emotionally invested in forcing a connection to work. And here is the part most people don't expect. When you stop needing people, you actually become more loving. Because now you are choosing, not clinging. You are giving, not bargaining. You are present, not anxious. You are able to say no without guilt and yes without fear. Your relationships stop being survival strategies and start becoming companionships. Some people will leave when they realize you no longer need them. That is not a loss. That is information. It tells you who benefited from your dependence, not your presence. Others will stay. And the relationship will feel lighter, more respectful, more honest, because they are no longer carrying the weight of being responsible for your happiness. And what remains after that separation is real. Real connection does not require you to shrink yourself. Real love does not ask you to betray your values. Real companionship does not survive on fear of abandonment. It survives on choice. So if you are struggling with this lesson, ask yourself one honest question. If this person left tomorrow, would my sense of worth collapse? If the answer is yes, then the work is not to hold on tighter. The work is to rebuild yourself. Because love is strongest when it is free, and freedom only exists where need has ended. Two people sense dependence before you speak. Most people think dependence shows up in words. It doesn't. It shows up long before you say anything. People sense it in your energy, in how quickly you respond, in how much you adjust yourself to keep the peace, in how often you apologize when you've done nothing wrong, in how afraid you seem of silence. You may believe you are hiding your insecurity well. You are not. Human beings are remarkably sensitive to emotional imbalance. They can feel when someone is afraid of losing them. They can feel when someone is overinvested. They can feel when your presence comes from anxiety instead of confidence. And once that feeling is there, the dynamic changes. When someone senses that you need them more than they need you, the balance quietly tilts. Not always because they are cruel, but because power always flows toward the person who can walk away. This is not about manipulation, it is about human nature. When you fear loss, you give more than is required. You listen more than you are heard. You compromise more than you should. You accept behavior you would never tolerate if you felt secure. And people respond to that, not consciously at first, but instinctively. Respect weakens when boundaries are soft. Effort decreases when availability is unlimited. Appreciation fades when your presence feels guaranteed. You might not notice it immediately. At first, it shows up subtly. Messages take longer. Promises become vague. Your concerns are minimized. Your discomfort is brushed aside. And instead of addressing it, you compensate. You become more understanding, more patient, more agreeable. You tell yourself you are being mature, but what you are really doing is trying to secure a connection through self-sacrifice. That strategy never works. The more you chase balance, the more you lose it. The more you try to prove your value, the less valuable you appear. Because value is not proven by effort, it is revealed by self-respect. This is why stopping emotional dependence changes how people treat you. When you stop needing people, your presence becomes calm. You are no longer trying to extract reassurance from every interaction. You are no longer scanning for signs of rejection. You are no longer interpreting silence as danger. You speak when you have something to say, not when you need to be seen. You listen without anxiety. You respond without urgency. You give without keeping score. And people feel that. They feel that you are not afraid of distance. They feel that you are not bargaining for attention. They feel that your life is full, not waiting. That calm is powerful. It signals that you are choosing to be there, not clinging to stay. And choice commands respect in a way desperation never will. Some people will test this shift. They may pull back to see if you chase. They may reduce effort to see if you overcompensate. They may use silence to see if you panic. If you return to need, the old pattern resumes. If you remain grounded, something important happens. The dynamic resets. Either the relationship rises to meet your stability, or it exposes that it was built on imbalance from the start. Both outcomes are valuable. This is also why people who are emotionally independent often seem intimidating. Not because they are unkind, but because they are unreadable in the best way. You cannot control them through approval or withdrawal. You cannot manipulate them through guilt or fear. They are present, but not attached. Engaged, but not dependent. And that changes everything. You stop being taken for granted because your time is no longer free by default. You stop being underestimated because your boundaries are consistent. You stop being overlooked because your silence carries weight. None of this requires arrogance. It requires alignment. When your inner state is secure, your outer behavior naturally reflects it. You don't need to announce boundaries. You embody them. You don't need to demand respect. You attract it. And here is the final truth of this lesson. If people only value you when you are afraid to lose them, they were never valuing you. They were benefiting from your fear. When you stop needing people, you stop feeding that imbalance. And for the first time, you get to see who is there for you, not because you are convenient, but because you are chosen. That clarity alone is worth the discomfort it takes to get there. 3, happiness is not a crowd activity. One of the biggest lies people absorb without questioning is the idea that happiness must be shared to be real, that joy only counts when it is witnessed, that peace only matters when someone else confirms it. This belief quietly traps people into chasing company instead of building contentment. Happiness is not a crowd activity. If your peace depends on noise, presence, messages, or constant interaction, then it is not peace, it is distraction. And distraction eventually fails because people leave, schedules change, attention shifts, and life does not guarantee constant companionship. Many people fear being alone not because they are lonely, but because solitude removes their masks. When you are alone, there is no audience to impress, no role to perform, no external validation to lean on. What remains is you, your thoughts, your habits, and your unresolved tensions. That is what scares people. So they stay busy, they stay surrounded, they fill every quiet moment with noise, not because they enjoy it, but because silence forces honesty, and honesty requires courage. But solitude is not punishment, it is training. When you learn to be happy alone, you stop outsourcing your emotional stability. You stop expecting others to regulate your mood, fix your boredom, or rescue you from discomfort. You take responsibility for your inner state. That responsibility is where power begins. A person who can sit alone without restlessness has already mastered something rare. They are not driven by impulse. They are not controlled by loneliness. They do not chase connection to escape themselves. They choose connection because they want to share, not because they need to be saved. This distinction changes everything. When happiness comes from within, relationships stop being a requirement and start being an addition. You are no longer desperate for company. You are selective. You are no longer filling emptiness. You are sharing fullness. That shift makes your presence lighter. People feel less pressure around you. Conversations become genuine, not performative. Silence becomes comfortable, not threatening. And most importantly, you stop settling. Many unhealthy relationships exist only because people are afraid of being alone. They accept poor treatment, emotional inconsistency, and lack of effort simply to avoid solitude. They confuse familiarity with safety and attention with care. But when you are happy alone, fear loses its leverage. You no longer stay just to have someone. You stay only where there is respect. You leave without drama when there is none. You do not cling to what drains you because you are not afraid of quiet. This does not mean you stop valuing people. It means you stop using them as emotional crutches. There is also a deeper layer to this lesson that many miss. Solitude sharpens awareness. When you are alone, you notice patterns, you recognize triggers, you observe habits that were previously masked by constant interaction. You become aware of what truly fulfills you and what merely distracts you. That awareness builds clarity, and clarity builds direction. People who avoid being alone often drift. They adopt the preferences, opinions, and priorities of whoever is around them. Their identity shifts depending on the room they are in. Their values bend to fit acceptance. But a person who is comfortable alone knows who they are, even when no one is watching. They move with intention. They speak with purpose. They do not chase trends or approval. They are not easily influenced because they are anchored. This is why solitude has always been associated with growth. Not because isolation is the goal, but because self-knowledge is. When you are happy alone, rejection loses its sting. You do not interpret distance as failure. You do not beg for inclusion. You do not feel diminished by being left out. You understand something most people never do. Your value does not increase with attention, and it does not decrease with absence. That understanding gives you emotional freedom. Freedom to walk away. Freedom to say no. Freedom to pause. Freedom to wait. And waiting becomes easier when you are not using people to escape yourself. Some will misunderstand this lesson. They will say being happy alone makes you cold or detached. That is not true. Emotional independence does not reduce compassion, it strengthens it. When you are not needy, your kindness is sincere. When you are not lonely, your generosity is clean. When you are not seeking validation, your presence is grounding. You give because you want to, not because you are afraid of losing connection. That is real maturity. So if solitude feels uncomfortable right now, do not rush to escape it. Pay attention to what it is revealing. Discomfort is often a signal, not a problem. It points to areas that need growth, healing, or discipline. Learn to sit with yourself without judgment. Build routines that nourish you. Develop interests that do not require applause. Strengthen your inner life until quiet no longer feels threatening. Because once you can be happy alone, you stop chasing people to feel alive. And when you stop chasing, you start choosing. And choice is where dignity lives. For need makes you easy to manipulate. This lesson is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. Because many people suffer not because others are powerful, but because they themselves are emotionally dependent. When you need people, you give them leverage over you. Not because they asked for it, not always because they intend harm, but because need quietly hands control to whoever can withdraw what you fear losing. When your happiness depends on someone's attention, their silence becomes a weapon. When your sense of worth depends on someone's approval, their disapproval becomes a threat. When your peace depends on someone staying, their distance becomes power. This is how manipulation begins. It does not always look dramatic. It often looks subtle. A delayed response, a change in tone, less effort, less warmth, and immediately your mind reacts. You start adjusting. You start questioning yourself. You start trying to restore balance. You ask what you did wrong. You soften your boundaries. You overextend your patience. Not because you believe you are wrong, but because you are afraid of losing access. And the more you adjust, the more predictable you become. Predictability is the foundation of manipulation. When someone knows that withdrawing attention will make you anxious, they can control your behavior without ever raising their voice. When someone knows you fear being alone, they can push limits and expect forgiveness. When someone knows you will stay no matter what, effort becomes optional. This is not about labeling people as evil. It is about understanding dynamics. Human beings respond to incentives. If there are no consequences for poor behavior increases. If your presence is guaranteed regardless of how you are treated, your needs will eventually be ignored. Need teaches people that they can do less and still keep you. That is the harsh truth. This is why emotional independence is not selfish, it is protective. When you are content alone, manipulation loses its effectiveness. Silence no longer scares you. Distance no longer pressures you. Withholding affection no longer controls you. You can observe behavior without panic. You can respond without urgency. You can pause instead of pleading. And that pause is powerful. It breaks the cycle. It forces clarity. It reveals intent. If someone is sincere, they will meet you in that calm space. They will communicate. They will adjust. They will respect your boundaries. If someone is using control, they will become uncomfortable. They will escalate. They will test harder. And in doing so, they expose themselves. That exposure is a gift. Because now you are no longer guessing. You are no longer confused. You are no longer trapped in emotional fog. You see the relationship for what it is, not what you hoped it would become. This is also where many people misunderstand strength. They think strength is confrontation. It is not. Strength is not arguing. It is not explaining yourself repeatedly. It is not proving your worth. Strength is being willing to walk away without hostility. When you stop needing people, you stop negotiating with your dignity. You stop trading self-respect for reassurance. You stop accepting crumbs just to avoid emptiness. You become unmovable, not because you are rigid, but because you are grounded. And grounded people are difficult to manipulate. They do not rush to fill silence. They do not panic at distance. They do not beg for clarity from those who benefit from confusion. They wait, they watch, they choose. That choice changes the entire dynamic. People either rise to meet your stability or fall away. Both outcomes protect you. So if you find yourself constantly anxious in a relationship, constantly adjusting, constantly afraid of saying the wrong thing, ask yourself an honest question. Is this connection built on mutual respect or on my fear of losing it? Because peace never requires you to abandon yourself, and any relationship that survives only when you are small is not a relationship you are meant to keep. When need ends, manipulation ends with it, and what remains is freedom. 5, stopping need does not mean stopping care. This is where many people get confused, and this confusion keeps them trapped. They hear stop needing people and assume it means becoming distant, cold, or emotionally unavailable. That is not growth. That is avoidance disguised as strength. Stopping need is not about caring less. It is about caring without losing yourself. There is a major difference. When you need people, your care is anxious. It comes with expectations. It comes with fear. It comes with an unspoken demand that they must respond, reciprocate, or remain close. Otherwise, you feel threatened. That kind of care is heavy. It pressures people. It suffocates relationships, even when your intentions are good. Real care is lighter. When you stop needing people, your care becomes intentional instead of compulsive. You give because you want to, not because you are afraid of losing connection. You help because it aligns with your values, not because you hope it will secure loyalty. This shift is subtle, but it changes everything. You stop over-giving to earn love. You stop rescuing people who refuse to grow. You stop fixing problems that are not yours to solve. Not because you are unkind, but because you are finally honest. Many people confuse sacrifice with virtue. They believe that the more they endure, the more loving they are. But endurance without boundaries is not love. It is self-erasure. When you stop needing people, you stop equating love with suffering. You realize that love does not require you to be depleted. It does not demand constant availability. It does not ask you to betray your own limits. Care that costs you your peace is not noble. It is unsustainable. This is why emotional independence actually deepens compassion. When you are not desperate for validation, you can listen without defensiveness. When you are not afraid of rejection, you can speak honestly. When you are not clinging to outcomes, you can show up fully without controlling the result. You become present, not performative. You also become clearer about what is yours to carry and what is not. You stop taking responsibility for other people's emotions. You stop feeling guilty for their disappointment. You stop managing their reactions at the expense of your own well-being. This is not selfishness, it is maturity. Caring without need allows you to say no without resentment. It allows you to give without keeping score. It allows you to walk away without hatred when staying would cost you your integrity. And here is something important that many people never learn. Needy care creates dependency. Healthy care builds strength. When you constantly accommodate, people do not grow. They adjust around you, but they do not improve. They rely on your flexibility instead of developing responsibility. When you care without need, you allow others to experience consequences. You allow discomfort to teach. You allow distance to reveal truth. That is real care. This also applies to forgiveness. Needy forgiveness excuses repeated harm. Grounded forgiveness releases resentment without reopening wounds. When you stop needing people, you no longer confuse forgiveness with access. You can forgive someone and still choose distance. You can wish them well and still protect yourself. That clarity is powerful. It means your kindness is no longer a liability. It means your generosity is no longer exploitable. It means your empathy is no longer used against you. You care, but you are not available for mistreatment. That balance is rare and it is earned through self-respect. Some people will accuse you of changing when you stop needing them. They will say you are colder, distant, or different. What they often mean is that you are no longer controllable. Do not let that confuse you. You are not less caring, you are less desperate. You are not detached, you are discerning. You are not hardened, you are healed enough to choose wisely. And when care comes from that place, it is clean, it is steady, it is strong. Because love that is freely given is far more powerful than love that is demanded. 6, your worth was never negotiable. Most emotional dependence can be traced back to one quiet belief that goes unchallenged for years. The belief that your worth increases when you are chosen and decreases when you are ignored. That belief is false, but it feels real because it is reinforced by people, experiences, and repeated rejection. So you begin negotiating with yourself. You tell yourself you must be more patient to be lovable, more understanding to be kept, more agreeable to avoid being left. Over time, you stop asking whether you are being respected and start asking whether you are being accepted. That is how worth becomes conditional in your mind. But your worth was never something others were meant to decide. It was not created by approval. It is not maintained by attention, and it does not disappear when someone walks away. The moment you internalize this, everything shifts. You stop proving yourself. You stop auditioning.